All right, so in today's video, we are going to be discussing Eric Bieniemy coming back to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, after the AFC Championship game finished with the Cincinnati Bengals, we didn't know the future of Eric Bieniemy in Kansas City because he was under the one-year contract that he signed after Super Bowl 55 and the Chiefs losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He signed a one-year deal after that, but now he has signed another one-year deal to come back to Kansas City. Now, my very first thought is I want to say I'm happy to have Eric Bieniemy back because I've been a Chiefs fan, my whole life, obviously. I mean, I was younger when the Chiefs were bad. I was still fairly young when the Chiefs were a good team, when they were, they got Patrick Mahomes. Heck, even when they got Alex Smith, I was still fairly young when they got him. So the Chiefs most of my life have been an above average football team. I was there during the Matt Castle days, the Todd Haley days, Romeo Crennel days, and I was also there when the Chiefs first got Andy Reid. So I know what it's like for the Chiefs to be consistently good because ever since they got Alex Smith and Andy Reid, the Chiefs have been a very competent football team, if not an above average football team, ever since 2013. So I know what it's like for the Chiefs to be good, but I also know what it's like for the Chiefs to be a bad football team because I sat through some of those bad games that the Chiefs were there. I mean, I was like 8 or 9 years old and they were really bad to watch because the offense was terrible at times. But I also know, I know what it's like for them to be bad, and I also know what it's like for them to be good. So I'm not going to take for granted any animosity people have towards Eric Bieniemy. I get it, but I'm not going to take for granted the fact that the Chiefs have an amazing offensive coordinator in Eric Bieniemy. And now for Andy Reid's side of this story, I think it just comes down to he obviously would have faith in Eric Bieniemy. He wouldn't bring him back if he didn't. He's loyal to his staff. I mean, he's loyal to a fault. He loves his guys. He loves his staff so much. So I think that's another reason why, for Andy Reid's standpoint, that Eric Bieniemy did come back. And there was that story that was circulating around Twitter, and I don't know how much of that was true. There was a lot of stuff in that it seemed like it went very in depth, but it also could be false. So I don't know the validity to any of that in that story. But if any of that is true and Eric Bieniemy saw that, I'm sure he saw it. I mean, people say they don't hear the noise, but I'm sure Eric Bieniemy saw that. I'm sure that will light a spark under EB and him coming back this year. But with Eric Bieniemy coming back and with it only being a one-year deal, for me, that leaves first a lot of questions. He was only, like I mentioned, on a one-year deal coming off the Super Bowl loss to Tampa Bay. So that kind of begs, the future of Eric Bieniemy and the Chiefs there, just last year. But he's also coming back again on a one-year deal. So I don't know what that means long-term for Eric Bieniemy and his coaching career. There's also the question if he could be the long-term offensive coordinator in Kansas City. Because, again, Andy Reid's loyal to Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy is arguably a key factor in the success the Chiefs have had, the past 4 years. So the Chiefs keeping him long-term might also be an option, but it also could lead to the next question is Eric Bieniemy staying with the Chiefs until Andy Reid retires and then becoming the head coach of the Chiefs. Because I know people, which I'll get into it, people do not like Eric Bieniemy at times, and I completely understand because the things I have listed down, I completely understand the frustrations when it comes to Eric Bieniemy. But a guy that is interviewed for nearly every head coaching job, albeit he hasn't gotten one, but a guy who's interviewed for nearly every head coaching job, there's obviously something to this guy that people see and people like in Eric Bieniemy. I mean, I get it, the NFL rules, whatever you want to get into that. I'm not here to discuss any of the NFL hiring processes. That's not the point of this. But obviously, there's something in Eric Bieniemy that gets him a interview process with every single one of these coaches, and most recently the Saints, because the Saints spent a lot of time with Eric Bieniemy before deciding not to hire him. But then there's also, I think, a make or break year for Eric Bieniemy this next season, because this next season can also determine whether or not he actually gets a head coaching job, not next season, but the season after that. So I think this season is vitally important for Eric Bieniemy to go out and have an amazing season as a coach, lead the Chiefs offense to great success. But there's also a chance that he could go back to college or take some time off. So there's a lot of questions with the Eric Bieniemy just signing a 1-year deals. But like I said, there's a lot of questions regarding his future. But I always thought, in my personal opinion of all these things, I always thought that he should have stayed in Kansas City until Andy Reid retired. I thought that was always his best chance at becoming a head coach in the NFL. I know people don't like Eric Bieniemy for a multitude of reasons. People don't like that take that I have, but a lot of people don't like a lot of the takes that I have, because I seem to take the optimistic road, or if it's really, really negative, I take the extremely negative road with what I'm saying. Now, to the people that don't like that take of Eric Bieniemy possibly becoming the head coach, I get it. His play calling is very, very questionable at times. As offensive coordinator, the Chiefs' offense under Eric Bieniemy and having Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback, you can argue that it was the absolute worst stretch of football the Chiefs played with those two at the helm. It was not even close. That was the worst stretch of football that I think the Chiefs have played. They looked very, very average at times. Like, don't get me wrong, the Chiefs would come out on fire every single drive of every single game to start every game. But I think the Giants' opening drive, because I was just talking to some people on Twitter when I was thinking of this video, that drive against the Giants, they literally open up, they can't be stopped, and then Mahomes throws an interception. Now, again, I don't know how much that necessarily has to do with Eric Bieniemy as it does with Mahomes and him struggling at the good chunk to start the season. But that drive right there kind of defines the Chiefs. There's times where they literally cannot be stopped, and then there's times where they're just constantly shooting themselves in the foot. And then, they'd have an opening drive, whether it be a touchdown or that interception, it didn't matter what happened after that. At stretches during the season, they could have a fire opening drive, and then immediately after that, they wouldn't do much the rest of the game. The Cowboys game, for example, that's a great one. They came out, they were pretty good to start the game, and then from after that, it was the defense that carried them in that game. So, it could be chopped up to coaching, because it looked like they were stubborn at times during the season, the offense and their play calling, because there was times where they could have, they couldn't handle the cover two as much. Like, they refused to run the football. They refused to change their passing schemes. It looked like they were always looking. They didn't want to change who they were. So that's the downfall of the Chiefs. They are stubborn and stuck in their ways because they know they have the talent and they have the quarterback and they have the coaches to be able to do all that. But that's also kind of a downfall for the Chiefs and this offense. And some of that, the coaching staff not adjusting does contribute to a lot of the struggles Mahomes does have. So I also chalk that up to the coaching staff. Them not, wanting to adjust to situations that were not favorable for them as an offense. They were stubborn and they just stuck in their ways and continued to try to take deep shot. And it just turned out to allow Mahomes to have one of his worst seasons as a starter. And even for an off season, they got it right. And Mahomes still, for a bad season for Mahomes, it would still be a career year for a lot of other quarterbacks. But, all the struggles they did have, Eric Bieniemy helped them look right going into the playoffs. Now, the playoffs, the first two games I thought were magnificent. They were great. We'll get into it here in a second, but I think the Pittsburgh game, the Buffalo game, and then for about a quarter and a half, basically 2 quarters, I thought the Chiefs played spectacular football. But ever since that play to end the first half of the Bengals game, the Chiefs offense did not look right the rest of that entire game. Now, apparently it was Eric Bieniemy's idea to kick a field goal, and part of me really, really wishes they would have done it in that situation. I get trying to go for it, but you were up a huge margin. I think it was 21-3 at that point. You go up 24-3. I really think that right there would set a tone, and Mahomes wouldn't lose his confidence. So whoever that one was on, that one was just a really bad play call. But the play calls, excluding that one, the play calls in the second half were really, really bad. Like, I think McKinnon ran for 7 yards, and then Mahomes threw an interception right after that. That's really frustrating to think about, because I have this take too. Mahomes had his worst career half as a starting quarterback, but I still place the most, if not all, the blame on the coaching staff for that loss. And I know people don't like that take, but that's just how I feel. That was a terrible display of coaching, because it's not just that drive. You had first and goal at the 5-yard line, and you come out and you had to kick a 44-yard field goal at that point, which is horrific. I think they ran 1 yard with McKinnon, and then Mahomes took back-to-back sacks. Now, as a quarterback, you have to get the ball out of your hand in that situation. But I bet the play calls that they got were not favorable. Now, I think Kelsey was open on one of them. And yes, Mahomes' confidence was shot. But I feel like in that situation, as a coach, you have to be telling Mahomes, just take the shot to the end zone. You don't need to extend the play. Mahomes was making plays with his legs that entire game. And that situation, that was not it. So I don't know if you chop that up to Mahomes or the coaching, but I think the combination of the two was very, very bad in that game. But if we're still talking about the playoffs, you have the Wildcat play that they had against the Steelers. Like these are just things that are kind of leading up to the downfall of the Chiefs when it came to the Bengals. Now the Bengals loss wasn't anything cute; it was just bad play calling. But like it was on the surface there of things that the Chiefs struggled with. That was a bad play call against the Steelers that led to the TJ Watt fumble and return for a touchdown. And then you have the play against Buffalo that if the Chiefs would have lost that game, easily would have been talked about still. Like we talk about everything that happened in the Cincinnati game. The Blake Bell speed option play would be the play that we would be talking about all offseason if the Chiefs had lost that game. That play right there, in my eyes, when it happened live, I thought that was the play that I thought the Chiefs, their season was done after that play. To take the ball out of Mahomes' hands in that situation, your best player, I thought was terrible, inexcusable, really bad. Luckily, it didn't lead to them losing that game. It led up to a spectacular finish. But that was also a very bad negative on the Chiefs. And then obviously, as I mentioned, his cute play calling. But that's all the negatives. But let's look at some positives, because we don't need to be negative all the time. Now, the positive sides isn't going to be as long, because the positives, I think, literally speak for themselves. Eric Bieniemy helped create one of, if not the most dominant offenses of the last 4 years. I looked at the statistics. The Chiefs never ranked below 6th in total offense with Patrick Mahomes and Eric Bieniemy as the duo, the offensive coordinator quarterback. So that's that's impressive. The offense, as bad as it is at times, to never rank outside the top 6 is just it's amazing. They're consistently one of the most dominant offenses in the entire NFL. And in the 4 years that the Mahomes and Eric Bieniemy have been paired together, they've hosted 4 straight AFC championship games, went to 2 Super Bowls. They won Super Bowl 54. And under Eric Bieniemy, he helped Mahomes become a 50-touchdown, 5,000-yard passer in his first career starting, helped Mahomes win league MVP, win Super Bowl MVP, and I know I talked about this as a negative, but just this past season when the Chiefs were struggling, Eric Bieniemy was a vital part of helping that offense get back on track. Now, obviously, when it comes to getting back on track, do I want the offense to get back on track where, maybe they're running the football instead of throwing it in certain situations? Of course, I know you have a $500 million man in Patrick Mahomes. And no, I know I just made the argument that you don't take the ball out of his hands. But the one adjustment I wish this coaching staff would do is learn to run the football more. McKinnon, late in the season, was the biggest X factor for that entire Chiefs team. Like, he became that dual threat running back that I just wish they would have used more of. And I think he was underutilized. As weird as that is to say, when you have Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce on the same team, I think Jerick McKinnon was underutilized. So that's obviously things I would love to be changed. But he was still vital when the Chiefs were struggling on offense. I mean, the Raiders game helped the Chiefs offense get back on track. So Eric Bieniemy, as much crap as we give him, I think he's still... I don't think there's going to be another... I mean, Matt Nagy was thrown around, but I mean, Eric Bieniemy, all the accomplishments he's helped the Chiefs. And I just think we're lucky to have Eric Bieniemy as an offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. As I mentioned to start this video, we know what the Chiefs are like to be bad, and we know what they're like to be good. And I think we would rather be good than go back to being bad. And I think just as the NFL, I bet teams, I really hope this is the year that Eric Bieniemy shows what he can do, and he finally becomes an NFL head coach in the future, because I think he deserves it. I think he's gotten all these interviews, and I think they see something to want to interview him consistently. But I also think they see something in him to why they don't want to hire him, because I mean, as I mentioned, the frustrating play calls, maybe that's what the teams see and why they don't want to hire him. But for a guy that's had interview for nearly every head coaching position, I think this is a make or break year. I think he needs to have a spectacular year. And I really do think this is the year for Eric Bieniemy to show that he is worth having as a head coach in the NFL, whether it's in Kansas City after Andy Reid retires or somewhere else in the NFL. But I'm glad to have Eric Bieniemy back as the Chiefs offensive coordinator. I hope they go out, they ignore the stinker of a game they had against Cincinnati, come back bigger, faster, stronger, better than ever, and let's grind and get to Super Bowl 57.